I don't know, Jorge. I think this blue rinse might make me look old. I prefer to look like a class. Hey, hi, it's me, Wilma Fingerdoo, with the Fingerdoo review of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 15, Episode 7. And to start things off, I have some tipperdoos to thank. Bobby Dorrance, Elizabeth C., and Lorraine Amicone used the YouTube thanks button to send me some love. That's just under the screen. It looks like that. Also, William Lord sent me a tipperdoo through my link tree, which is on my Instagram, and my tipperdoo boyfriend Vito went old school with the tipperdoo link that's in the description box down below. Sounds dirty. Thanks to you all. I love you and appreciate you. Seriously. Now, Jorge, drink me. Oh, look at, what is this? It's a Valentine's Day cocktail. Oh, that's nice. What's it called? The hot, wet slap. That used to be my finishing move. Slappy. Ooh, and perky. It's lemonade. Oh, it's lovely. Thank you, Jorge. Now, before we get started, I have some news. It looks like the stupid good-lookings over at MTV have heard the grumblings and decided to reinstate Drag Race's 90-minute airtime starting Friday, March 10th. I know, big whoop. We'll have 2 episodes left to watch, but at least that means we won't get short-sheeted for the finale. So, cheers to that. Yummo. Now, don't ask me what that means about that WayHo show, because I simply just don't care. I also want to go on record as saying that this episode of Drag Race was the worst one I've ever suffered through, and that includes Canada's Drag Race. Tell me I'm wrong. From the horrible writing for this week's Maxi Challenge to the moments in the workroom, we seem to breeze by a lot, and I feel like it didn't do this episode any favors. Case in point, we started this week's episode off by breezing by saying goodbye to Robin and jumped right into Metalgate 2.0. Mistress got the wrecking ball rolling by crowing about how she thought her entire team should have been in the top. Cue Sasha and Malaysia's eye rolls. Of course, Lux shared how Malaysia had aired her issues over Metalgate last week in Untucked, but when confronted by Mistress, Malaysia resorted to the age-old, I said what I said. I don't know if she did the head thing, but I like to do it. Mistress tried to blow the whole situation off as her just being funny, but if you ask me, she was backpedaling, and it felt like Sasha thought so too. She pointed out how Mistress had come off as patronizing. Inwardly, Mistress thought Sasha was trying to make this incident a teaching moment, which Mistress didn't seem to appreciate. But outwardly, to save face, Mistress apologized to Sasha for taking her joke too far, even though she still didn't feel like she'd done anything wrong. Of course she didn't. And that's what Sasha was trying to teach her. As far as Malaysia was concerned, the only queen who thought Mistress was trying to be funny was Mistress. Still, Mistress apologized for making Malaysia feel a certain way, but she wasn't going to apologize for her actions. Aren't those two things the same thing? Although Mistress tried to point out to Malaysia how Sasha used her words to resolve the issue, it felt more like Sasha was just over the whole situation and refused to give it any more energy. As for Malaysia, it looked like she'd found her new hobby, arguing with Mistress. All I have to say is I'm glad I don't troll the interwebs because I can just hear those keyboards clacking out their vitriol as I speak. Seriously. Regardless of who said what to who now, both queens remained openly salty towards each other, although I did notice that no one congratulated Aura on her first win. Here's to Aura. Celebrate while you can, doll. Seriously. The next day in the workroom, there was definitely a feeling in the air, and that feeling was hurt. Thankfully, Ru arrived with this week's Maxi Challenge, the reboot of the Daytona Wins. Estides was excited because she loved the odoriferous sound effects from last season's episode. Well, she was immediately disappointed because Ru announced that instead of filming Daytona Wins like a soap opera, this year they would be filming it sitcom style, aka with a laugh track. Personally, I would have preferred the fart noises. Because Aura was last week's winner, she got to cast the queens. This was another moment that got lost in the editing for me. We didn't get a character list or description, so when multiple queens started vying for the same roles, I was just lost. Case in point, the role of Fancy. Estides, Lux, Lucy and Mistress wanted that role because it was a huge personality, and as Stiddy rightly said, it was the role designed to give its queen a win. That must have been why Aura took it for herself. Although, I thought it was telling that Aura couldn't even get her name right. She kept calling her Fantasy. Probably because it's a fantasy that she's going to win a second time in a row. Malaysia seemed pleased to get the role of the Reverend until she realized how many scenes she would be sharing with Mistress. Lux noticed too, but was hoping that they would sabotage themselves so that she could snag herself another win. In another suspiciously shady moment that came up while the queens were rehearsing was the fact that Aura was stinking up the role of Fancy so badly that Mistress offered to switch her role of Widow with her. So Mistress ended up playing Fancy after all. Well played, Mistress. Well played. This did not go unnoticed by the other queens. Lux commended Mistress on getting the role she actually wanted, and Marcia Cubed dubbed them Malistress. Not on purpose, mind you. She just caught herself tongue-tied, and that little gem popped out. Happy accident. Then, without warning or build-up, the queens were suddenly on the set of Daytona Wins with their director, Ru. Spice looked great, but she needed a lot of direction from Ru, none of which she took in. I personally loved that she thought her lower voice was different from her regular voice. They were exactly the same, bless. At least she's pretty. Malaysia, on the other hand, took her direction well and had Ru fake laughing all over the place. Mistress did well too, so much so that Ru could see both of them in a Daytona Wins spin-off called Heaven and Hell. I'm not surprised. Their characters weren't written as friends, so the animosity they had for each other ended up being perfection. Hell, if they thought that hating each other would have got either one of them a win, they would have started hating each other a lot earlier, I'm just saying. Jax was another one who struggled. For a self-professed stoner chick, she was having trouble portraying a stoner chick, and nothing Ru said seemed to help. Maybe Ru should have slipped her a few edibles. Or maybe she did already. Poor Aura wasn't shining any brighter in the role of Widow. I couldn't tell if it was nerves, short-term memory issues, or more wonky editing, but it was beginning to feel like there wasn't any role that she would have shone in. Seriously. Is it shone or shined? Something else that happened during filming was the entrance of a surprise guest star whom we didn't see. Clearly, production wanted it to be a surprise, but I think it would have been a bigger surprise if they just saved it for the viewing at panel. But they didn't ask me. Idiots. The next day, Malistress got ready next to each other. Clearly, their success together during filming was the catalyst Malaysia needed to bury the hatchet with Mistress. Finally. I still think Mistress was being a mean girl and blowing it all off, but it was good that those two could get over themselves. Seriously. And then, just like that, it was time for the runway. I loved Ru's dress, but that nude panel down the front of it was too bright under the studio lights and distracted me. Just saying. Michelle was beautiful in blue sequins, and Carson broke out his Chanel pins for the occasion. Joining them this week at the judges panel was the actor and one of the stars of What We Do in the Shadows, Harvey Guillen. Category is Puffer Please. Lucy's Puffer Runway paid homage to the Ghostbusters Stay Puff Marshmallow Man. I thought it was so clever I absolutely gave her a Fingerdoo. And yes, Puffy Runway was the name of my fringe play. Spice's puffy look was cute, but not as puffy as I'd have liked it to be. Still, Fingerdoo for Spice. Sasha's layered puffer bee was pure art, which kept evolving with every layer she removed. How can I not give it a Fingerdoo? Seriously. Lux's puffy ode to Jacqueline Kennedy was fun, but it looked more like a balloon than a puffer coat. Heck, she was even sporting a purse in the shape of a balloon dog. It still was worthy of a Fingerdoo. It just wasn't puffy enough for me. Is anything. Malaysia's lemony puffer, complete with lemonade carton purse, was breathtaking, so I totally gave her a Fingerdoo. Aura's puffer kimono was also inspired, so she got a Fingerdoo as well. Jax's puffer bee was definitely worn better by Sasha Colby, but still, it was one of the puffier looks on the runway, so I gave her a Fingerdoo. Mistress's size-appropriate puffer look was fun, but with the lack of volume on her legs, it gave her bikini bottom the look of an adult diaper. Still, Fingerdoo for Mistress. Now I have to pee. Anitra's puffy hooker look was fun, and she sold the hell out of it, like any good hooker would. Marsha's Arctic puffer still needed more makeup, at least on her face, but it was still cute enough for me to give her a Fingerdoo, just saying. I wasn't a fan of Estidi's compartmentalized puffer. It was just too busy for me to focus on what she'd stuffed into the compartments, and took it out of the category of puffer coat and put it in the realm of utility belt, in my opinion. So I gave her a Fingerdoo. Plus, those spicy Cheetos didn't look good on her crotch. Just saying. And then, unfortunately, it was time to watch Daytona Wins. The worst thing about this challenge was the editing, because it ruined the timing and killed most of the jokes. Not that I felt there were many jokes worth laughing at. I mean, why the obsession with those ants? And that extended shot of Lucy looking through those opera glasses. Also, the script, and I used the term loosely, was mostly a rehash of every catchphrase ever uttered on Drag Race, whether they were funny or not. I found it all very distracting. The queens who did well were Lucy, Marsha Cubed, and Anitra. Although Melistris did well, I felt that their funnier moments got edited out of the final product. Also, Sasha and Lux's parts were edited so badly that I forgot that they were there at all. Which, let's face it, was probably a good thing. The clear weak links were Aura and Jax, but I felt that their parts could have been saved by better editors. And by better editors, I mean anyone other than whoever edited this. Seriously. And who was the surprise guest star, you ask? Well, if you were like me, at this point, you no longer cared. Which was too bad, because it was the fabulous character actor Danny Trejo as Big Daddy. I don't know why. Has he fallen on hard times? Not that I'm angry at it, but there was a moment there where I thought it was going to be Latrice Royale. Just me? No. And then it was time for the judges' critiques. Lucy, Sasha, Lux, and Estides were safe. Of course they were. They were practically edited out of the challenge, so how could they have failed? Seriously. Spice's performance didn't go over well with Carson, and Michelle read her for not only having more or less the same silhouette on every runway, but using the same walk as well. Malaysia's performance in the challenge was a hit, and her runway was one of the judges' faves. Aura's runway was better than her performance, and that's about all. Ru even commented on how hard she was to direct. Well, that doesn't bode well. Jax sucked some hard candy in the challenge, but tried to blow it off as the fault of her character's description. It wasn't. Mistress was another one who resonated with the judges during the challenge as well, and the star of her runway was her titty twerk. Anitra got some great kudos from the judges, as did Marsha Cubed, who still wasn't wearing as much makeup as Michelle would have liked, but it was more than they were used to, so she didn't totally hate it, I guess. Back in the Untucked Lounge, Lucy was pissed that she wasn't in the top this week. Sasha didn't see it, and Lux was over it, probably because neither of them did better than Safe themselves. To change the subject, they talked about Danny Trejo's cameo. I loved the outtakes of him telling the queens how impressed his daughter was about his being on the show. Maybe that's why he did it. They also talked about how badly Aura did and the clever way Mistress mopped the part she wanted. Speaking of the devils, the top and bottom queens entered the workroom, and right away, Aura owned that she was in the bottom. Jax was also expecting to be lip-syncing after the critique she got. Well, at least she's prepared. Mistress shared how much the judges loved her performance, so much so that she was hoping to get her first win of the season. But then, Malaysia was also a fave, just saying. Cue Lucy whinging over being safe. Again. Mistress thought it boiled down to her lack of puffiness on the runway. And I don't mean that in a sexy way. Of course, Harvey Guillen dropped by for a visit. He was talking about overcoming the stereotypes of casting in America as a plus-size queer actor, and he had some great advice for the queens about how to improvise within a scene. Back on the main stage, this week's winner was Mistress. Finally! After being so close to a win more than a couple of times, it was nice to see her get some recognition. Seriously. The funniest moment in the whole episode, including that horror that was Daytona Wins, was Ru yelling, "Cue the sniper!" when a safe Spice pranced off stage. Fingerdoo for RuPaul's Charles. Seriously. The queens in the bottom were Jax and Aura. Their song was Sweetest Pie by Megan Thee Stallion and Dua Lipa. I was expecting this to be a cut and dried lip sync. Both these queens are hardcore performers, but Aura kept trying to block Jax from the judges, but there was no blocking Jax's stunts and tricks. I thought I'd seen all her moves, but there were clearly a few she'd been holding back. So, when the music died, it was Jax who shantaed and, in my opinion, became the season 15 lip sync assassin, officially. And, sadly, it was Aura who sashayed away. She was clearly surprised by her elimination after winning last week. Bless her. So, what about you? Did you find this episode as hard to watch as I did? Do you think Malistras have truly buried their hatchet, or will their differences rear their ugly heads again? And what about Jax? Is she dancing on borrowed time, or will she land in the bottom again and finally sashay away? All we can do is tune into RuPaul's Drag Race next week to see how it all plays out. And then, when you're done, you come on back and you see me so you and I can compare notes. Now, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and check out the links in the description box for links to my Redbubble store, joining the Fingerdoo family on Patreon, or leaving a tipper-doo. Until next week, miss me! Serious. God, the editing. Jesus, it was like the editors wanted to make this challenge look as unfunny as possible. I mean, they held the shot of the ants for so long. There was that shot of Lucy. There was also, after his titties had come in, there was also shots of people looking at each other, and there was no point. Like, there was no reason. Made me miss the fart sounds. If they'd thrown some fart sounds in there, at least it would have been something. But still, good grief. I also feel like if they had tightened up the editing of Daytona Wins, they would have had more time for other things in the episode. Not a lot, but more. And at this point, even a smidge of time to explain some of these things would help out a lot. Seriously. I don't think I'll make it till March 10th. Oh, God.